Trust yourself. You know more than you think you do. That's the first sentence of Dr. Benjamin Spock's Baby and Child Care, 1946. I found my grandmother's copy, and the spine is held together with packing tape.
And now, every parenting book starts with, "You're probably doing it wrong, but for $29.99.
That's exactly the angle. In 1946, Spock opens by telling you to calm down. In 2026, the whole ecosystem is designed to make you feel like you need a license to burp a child.
The industry doesn't sell advice. It sells the idea that your intuition is a liability. Because if you trusted yourself, you wouldn't buy the app, the course, the sleep consultant.
Although Spock sold 50 million copies, so he wasn't outside the industry, but his pitch was, here's the info, go be a parent. Now it's, there's always one more thing you're forgetting.
Right. It's the difference between a library and a subscription service. One you own, one owns you. I saw a momfluencer yesterday explaining biological wake windows with a ring light behind her, and I thought, this is a late capitalist medieval priest. She's selling indulgences for bad naps.
Okay, but there's real developmental science under some of this. Sleep pressure, cortisol, all that. The problem is it gets turned into rigid doctrine by someone with no training and an affiliate code for a swaddle.
Exactly. It's not that babies changed, it's that the conditions of parenting changed. In 1946, your pediatrician knew your family. Your neighbors heard your baby cry. Your mother lived next door. Now, you're alone in a 4-bedroom with a Bluetooth monitor, and the algorithm says, here's why your child's sleep is a moral failing.
That's the thing. The tech does real data collection now. I saw an app that tracks feeding, diapers, sleep, mood, tummy time. It generates a readiness score. A readiness score for a 2-month-old.
A baby with a credit rating. That's the world we're building.
But some people need the data because they're anxious. My sister would have killed for that. She wanted evidence she wasn't insane. So I don't want to say all tools are bad.
Sure, but the tool only becomes necessary because the social support is gone. If you had 3 adults in the house, you wouldn't need an app to tell you the baby ate 14 minutes ago. The app is a market solution to a care crisis.
So your fix is multi-generational housing and paid leave, not better parenting apps.
My fix is make the village exist again, then see which apps survive. Probably none.
Okay, but that's a longer timeline. In the meantime, you've got Emily Oster writing Crib Sheet, saying, look at the data. Maybe you can have a glass of wine.
Emily Oster is just Spock with a spreadsheet. Trust yourself. Here's a p-value. I respect it, but she still monetizes the same anxiety.
I think there's a distinction between evidence-based advice and a rando selling a toddler discipline masterclass on Instagram. The first says, here's what we know. The second says, here's what you lack.
Fair, but the algorithm doesn't distinguish. You go from one chakra check to a funnel for gentle parenting that requires a subscription and 2 forms of payment. The barrier to entry is 0, and the barrier to exit is your own guilt.
Spock wrote 1 book, revised later, but 1 book. Now there are 500 new parenting books a year. It's a genre that runs on churn.
Because the customer base refreshes every 2 years. You get 1 baby, panic buy until they turn 4, then feel guilty you didn't do enough and buy a book for the next kid.
Yeah. What to expect when you're expecting to need another book.
There's a reason the first line isn't, consult your pediatric expert. It's an anti-expert message. Spock knew the alternative was Dr. Watson telling mothers not to kiss their babies. Rigid schedules, no affection, scientific parenting.
And now the pendulum swung the other way. Everything is attachment, co-sleeping, contact naps. If you don't wear your baby for 9 hours a day, you're not building a secure attachment.
So both extremes are an industry. The behaviorists sold coldness. The attachment influencers sell martyrdom. Spock's actual message was, you know more than the experts. That's the one thing that doesn't scale.
Maybe that's why it feels subversive now. Every platform is optimized to tell you that you don't know enough. Spock is like a 1946 ad for not clicking.
You know more than you think is the enemy of the engagement model. If you feel competent, you put the phone down, and they can't have that.
So, do you trust yourself as a parent? I mean, if you had one.
I trust myself to know when I need help, but I'd still Google, why is my baby making that noise at 3 a.m.? The difference is I'd read one article and close the tab, not buy a course.
I'd create a spreadsheet. We'd be a nightmare co-parenting.
You'd have a sleep regression projected with a moving average. I'd be out back telling the baby, the state has abandoned us, but we have each other.
So the real Spock line should be updated. Trust yourself. If you can afford the time to.
Exactly. Trust is a luxury now. The industry sells it back to you one microtransaction at a time. So we just ended on trust being a luxury the wellness industry sells back to you. And on my walk here, I passed a guy pushing a double stroller at 7 a.m., staring through me like a hostage who's forgotten his captor's demands.
That guy is the entire parenting literature in one image. I was rereading Daniel Kahneman's 2004 study, and he has this line. Let me read it exactly. Parents report more positive affect overall, but less positive affect while interacting with their children than while doing other activities.
So the overall vibe is great, but the actual product experience is bad. That's a Yelp review for a restaurant with rats, but great lighting.
It's not even a contradiction. Baumeister, 1991, argued happiness and meaning are different systems. Happiness is about getting what you want. Meaning is about doing something that feels consequential. Parenting is pure meaning with terrible short-term happiness returns.
So it's Stockholm Syndrome with a car seat. You're held hostage by a tiny person who screams at you for cutting their toast the wrong way, and your brain rebrands the suffering as purpose.
I'd push back. The suffering isn't rebranded. The suffering is part of why it feels meaningful. It's like exercise. Almost nobody is happy on the treadmill, but people report higher life satisfaction because of what the workout does for them.
Exercise doesn't wake you every 90 minutes and bite your nipple.
Fair point, but the analogy holds in one way. The happiness deficit during the activity disappears when you look at overall life evaluation. Parents, on average, say their lives matter more to them, even when their Tuesday afternoons are hell.
But that's retrospective. You ask parents later, and they edit the montage. The scream fits are set to orchestral music. It's the same mechanism as a guy saying his frat hazing made him stronger. No, it just hurt, and now you're bonded to the people who hurt you.
But meaning is retrospective by definition. You can't know if something was meaningful while it's happening. And look, Kahneman's study was specific. It found lower positive affect during direct childcare activities. But the overall positive affect was not a lie. It came from identity, social status, and connection. Those are real psychological products.
But what is meaning, if not a story we tell ourselves? Baumeister's own research says meaning is about connecting your life into a coherent narrative. Narratives can be imposed. If you spend 18 years exhausted and broke, of course you tell yourself it mattered. The alternative is unbearable.
I don't think a narrative is a bug. We're the stories we tell. And if the story keeps people invested in raising the next generation with care, That's functional for the person and for society.
Functional for society? Absolutely. Child rearing is unpaid labor that keeps the future labor force coming. No wonder it's valorized as the deepest meaning you can have. They need future workers, and someone has to be on the hook for it emotionally.
Okay, but you just moved the goalposts. First it was Stockholm Syndrome, now it's ideological capture. Which is it?
Both. I contain multitudes. So does the diaper bag.
Gross. But seriously, Baumeister would say meaning comes from value and identity. Happiness comes from need satisfaction. Kids wreck your need satisfaction in the moment, but can strengthen your identity if being a parent is central to who you are. It's not forced. People do choose it, although maybe with terrible information about what it'll feel like.
Choose? In this economy? With child tax credits expired, daycare costing more than rent, and abortion access vanishing in half the country? That's not a choice. That's a narrowing tunnel. We're back to trust being a luxury. Trust that you'll have enough time, energy, and money to enjoy the kid.
That's true, and the data backs you. The happiness penalty for parents is much smaller in countries with parental leave and subsidized childcare. U.S. parents show one of the largest well-being gaps in the developed world. The paradox is partly manufactured by policy.
So the meaning is what's left when the state gives you nothing. It's a coping mechanism that got spiritualized. We turned a labor shortage into a religion and called it the highest purpose.
I'd argue even with perfect supports, there would still be a happiness and meaning gap because kids are existentially hard. But the gap wouldn't be a crisis. It'd be like a marathon instead of a hostage situation.
Maybe, but let's not pretend the current data is pure biology. When you make parents poor, isolated, and sleep-deprived, they'll report more meaning and less happiness, because there's no alternative story that makes the exhaustion bearable.
You're really committed to the Stockholm thing.
I'm committed to that eggs are $8 a dozen. We have no universal childcare, and people still debate whether having kids is the only path to a meaningful life. Maybe meaning is just whatever gets you through the night.
Or maybe meaning is what makes the night worth getting through. Both can be true.
Maybe. But until they run a longitudinal study on parents with free childcare and paid leave, I reserve the right to call it Stockholm with a bassinet.
Funny you say that. There's research on Washington, D.C.'s universal childcare expansion. Parental well-being improved significantly. Nowhere near perfect, but the effect was real.
Good. So the fix isn't better vibes about parenthood. It's better policy. Shocking conclusion from the structural guy.
We can do both. Better policy and more honest conversations about the meaning gap. Tell people the first few years will feel like a low-grade fever that talks.
Honest conversations, meaning not everything has to be sacred to be worthwhile. You can hate 4 p.m. and still love the overall chapter.
That's the paradox. Worthwhile and miserable. Kids are the original both and.
Fine. I'll update the Spock line from last segment. Trust yourself. If you can afford the time, energy, and meaning subsidy.
And if not, there's always a Tamagotchi.
Tamagotchi had better sleep patterns.
So the last thing you said was about a Tamagotchi having better sleep patterns than me, which is true, but it connects to what I was reading last night. I went back to that Sarah McClanahan paper from 2004.
The Diverging Destinies one? The title alone sounds like a bad YA novel series. Diverging Destinies, Book 3, The SAT Prep and the Unplanned Pregnancy.
Right. But the core thesis is exactly what happened. She's writing before the iPhone, before Tinder, before the 2008 crash. And she basically predicted the last 20 years of American family life with terrifying accuracy. Her line is, "The family is not dying, it is diverging."
That's a hell of a quote. It sidesteps the whole moral decline panic and just says, look, the distribution changed. We have a two-tiered system now. It's not that people stopped forming families. It's that the stability of those families has become a luxury good.
Exactly. She calls it the two-family model. On one track, you have the college-educated, the affluent. They get married, then have kids. Planned, usually in their late 20s or 30s. On the other track, you have the high school educated, the working class. They have kids first, maybe never marry, and the households are unstable, accidental.
The bifurcation of the family. It's like the widening gap in income, but applied to intimacy. The rich get the scaffolding of a two-income, stable, legally recognized partnership. The poor get the chaos of trying to raise a kid on a single paycheck from a warehouse job that's always one bad cough away from disappearing.
And she posits that the second demographic transition, divorce, cohabitation, non-marital childbearing, used to be a pioneer behavior of the educated elite in the 60s and 70s. They experimented with it. Now, the elite have retreated back to stable marriage. It's the working class that's stuck living in the experimental zone without a safety net.
It's the higher education as birth control effect. If you have a degree, you wait to have kids until you have a mortgage and a Costco card. If you don't, the timeline compresses. You're an adult at 16, working, and by 22, you have a toddler. Not because you're irresponsible, but because the future is so flat that there's no reason to delay gratification. There's no gratification to bank on later.
Right. Marriage is delayed or skipped because, let's be honest, the men in that economic bracket are struggling. They're not marriage material economically, and women know that. So they have kids anyway because kids are a source of meaning when the economy offers none. But they don't tie themselves legally to a guy who can't hold a job at AutoZone.
So you get this weird inversion. The upper class treats marriage as a capstone. You only get married when you've made it. The lower class treats it as a trap, locking yourself to someone else's debt and instability. The upper class tax shelters their kids in stable two-parent homes. The lower class has to deal with the diverging destinies of having dads who are visiting, not living there.
Which brings us to the geography of it. This isn't distributed evenly. You look at the map. The blue states, the coastal economies, have lower rates of non-marital childbirth. The red states, the Sun Belt and the Rust Belt, have exploded with it.
The traditional family values states are the ones with the least intact families. It's the ultimate irony. They vote for the party of family, but the economic policies they live under, low wages, precarious employment, no health care, totally dissolve the material basis for a stable family.
Which is why the J.D. Vance thing is so weird. I maintain J.D. Vance is secretly a McClanahan stan.
Oh, absolutely. The guy wrote Hillbilly Elegy, which is basically a tragic memoir about the unstable track. He gets the divergence intuitively. He grew up in it. The childless cat ladies comment is the dark, seedy underbelly of this framework.
Explain that. I want to hear the DSA take on the cat lady panic.
Look, Vance sees the divergence. He sees the educated elite, people like you and me, Marty, who have skills, money, and stability, and he sees us delaying childbearing, maybe not having kids at all. He thinks we're hoarding the human capital. We're too busy drinking oat milk lattes and building spreadsheets to reproduce.
So he sees the cat lady as a sort of demographic traitor.
Exactly. He thinks the stable, smart people, the ones who would make good citizens in his view, are opting out, while the people without resources are having all the kids. It's a eugenic panic from the right. The wrong people are having babies.
So he's angry that the elite aren't breeding, and he's angry that the poor are breeding wrong. It's a no-win scenario for everyone except the cats.
The cats are thriving. They don't need a marriage contract.
But the data he's drawing from is real. The childless rates among college-educated women are higher than for non-college women. But it's not just cat ladies. It's a rational response to the economic conditions they're being offered.
If you put a woman through years of professional school, give her student debt, but no national paid leave, no affordable childcare, and no secure housing, you are signaling to her that children are a career death sentence. You can't have it all if all includes a daycare that costs more than your rent. So she gets a dog or a cat.
Or both. A dog and a cat.
And a mortgage she can just barely afford on her own. The solo, childless, high-earning woman is the ultimate creation of late capitalism. She's productive, she's efficient, she's educated. She's just not reproducing the labor force because the system made it economically insane to do so.
So if Vance wants to fix the divergence, he should be the loudest voice for universal childcare, which is a funny thing because that's the left position.
He knows it. He's a smart guy. He read McClanahan. He knows that the only way to close the gap between the married, affluent track and the unmarried, struggling track is to provide stability to the bottom, to make low-wage work not a one-way ticket to family chaos. But his politics require him to blame the women for not wanting to marry the men and to blame the safety net for enabling single mothers.
It's the classic you have agency, but we stripped the floorboards away problem.
You know what the deepest irony is? That 2004 paper was arguing that the two-parent household is now reserved for those with capital. And the right-wing response isn't, let's give capital to everyone so they can have families. It's, let's force everyone to live under the same precarious conditions and see who survives. They want to drag the upper track down, not lift the lower track up.
That's a dark way to put it, but it tracks. It's the difference between believing in family as a cultural artifact and believing in family as a policy outcome.
And the divergence just keeps widening. The latest data shows that the marriage gap by education is enormous. If you have a bachelor's degree, you're probably married and your kids live with both parents. If you don't, you're probably in a serial cohabiting relationship or single and your kids are splitting time.
It's become a genetic sorting mechanism. We are literally assigning different life trajectories to children based on the zip code and diploma of their parents before they are born.
So what do we do about it? Because you know my answer.
I know your answer. You want to bulldoze the whole system and rebuild it as a cooperative. I want to regulate the system and tax the rich to pay for pre-K.
I want to make single motherhood not feel like a financial death sentence. You want to make marriage feel affordable again.
And maybe, just maybe, if we did either of those things, the destinies would stop diverging.
And J.D. Vance would lose his favorite talking point.
Oh, he'd find another one. He'd pivot to hating people who own reptiles.
The childless snake owners are ruining this country.
Rollo, I hate that you can do that with a straight face.
It's the only face I have left. Maybe we should start a family formation fund. Invest in the bottom track. See if we can close the gap before the snake people take over.
Look, if we subsidize childcare, people will have kids. It's not complicated. The divergence isn't a mystery. It's money.
It's always money. Love is just the branding.
This is a hell of a segment. We went from cat ladies to economic determinism in under a minute.
Story of my life. We should probably pay a bill.
Let's do it. But I'm not letting you run the snake owner's ad.
Fine, we'll run the premium divorce paperwork ad. It's very on brand for the two-track family.
So we just ran an ad for premium divorce paperwork, and now we're supposed to talk about whether you should have kids. That's either perfect or a cry for help.
It's perfect. Divorce is just the late-stage patch note for the procreative decision, the original subscription model. Sign up for life, get billed in sleep and identity.
I was rereading David Benatar before we started. He writes, "Coming into existence is always a harm. Not sometimes, not under late capitalism, always."
I know. That sentence should come with a warning label. I read Better Never to Have Been in one sitting after my sister had her kid, and I felt insane for 2 weeks. You're at a baby shower eating cake while this South African philosophy professor tells you the birthday is the injury.
Explain the asymmetry for people who haven't spent a weekend in a bad mood.
It's almost elegant. If you exist, pain is bad. If you don't exist, the absence of pain is good, even though there's no one there to enjoy it. If you exist, pleasure is good. If you don't exist, the absence of pleasure isn't bad, because there's no one deprived. So non-existence always wins by 1 point.
That's not math. That's an accounting trick. You can't say the absence of pain is good when there's no subject. The sentence doesn't refer to anyone.
That's exactly his point. The non-existent don't need to experience it for it to be a good state of affairs. The asymmetry is about the world, not about how it feels to be dead. You just don't want to admit the spreadsheet is consistent.
I don't want to admit that a consistent spreadsheet can justify human extinction.
It doesn't justify extinction. It says bringing new people into existence is always a net harm to the person created. Extinction just happens if everyone agrees.
But Plato would say you've got the definition of good wrong. For Plato, the good life isn't about maximizing pleasure minus pain. It's about eudaimonia, flourishing. You can't flourish as an isolated utility calculator. You need relationships, obligation, care. Kids are one of the few remaining ways to be yanked out of yourself.
So the argument for kids is that they're an ego-breaking device? My gym has a class for that.
I'm serious. Plato's Symposium has Diotima say reproduction is how mortals touch immortality. Not just making babies, creating anything. But kids are the most literal way. You participate in the good by making something that outlasts you. That's not just a social duty. It's how you become more real.
That's beautiful, if you ignore that the thing you made will eventually suffer and die. You've just passed the curse forward and called it meaning.
Or you've given someone the only chance to experience any good at all. Benatar says non-existence is better because no pain. But by that logic, every existing person is a mistake. And yet, you're here, cracking jokes.
Being here doesn't mean it was good for me to be brought here. It just means I can't now undo it without causing more harm. That's the trap.
Look, I'm not saying everyone should have kids, but there's real data. Parents report lower moment-to-moment happiness, but higher meaning. Kahneman found that. So it depends what you're optimizing for.
Right. The meaning is just the brain's way of rebranding what's killing you. It's like joining the army. Awful in every measurable way, but you get a sense of purpose, and everyone says thank you for your service.
That's a terrible analogy. The army exists to produce violence. A family exists to produce care.
Have you met a toddler? They're non-combatants, but they commit war crimes daily.
Okay, fair. But you're dodging the Plato point. The good life is not just about individual well-being. It's about being part of a polis, a community that continues after you. Kids are the original infrastructure.
So is the question, is it good for you or good for society? Because you just answered society. And I'm saying the individual is sitting there with a $400,000 bill and chronic sleep debt.
I think Plato would say the distinction is false. You are not a separate thing from your society. If the city is unjust, having kids might be wrong. But if it's just, the good for you and the good for the whole converge.
And we definitely live in a just city. We've got a proposed abortion surveillance registry, egg prices at $8, and a president renaming the Gulf of Mexico. Very platonic.
That's the real issue. We're asking individuals to make a procreative leap in a society that treats children as either a tax credit or a culture war prop. I'm not going to tell people to have kids for the good of the polis, while the polis is doing everything to make raising them impossible.
Exactly. The current discourse is obscene. J.D. Vance wants more births, but also wants to gut the Department of Education. The right wants babies, not children. Once they're out of the womb, they're just future workers or future inmates.
So we agree that pronatalist coercion is bad. But where I diverge from Benatar is that he'd say even in a perfect world, having kids is always a harm. I think that's nihilism dressed up as logic.
Or it's logic that leads to a conclusion you find emotionally unacceptable.
Or the logic smuggles in a preference for non-existence from the start. The asymmetry only works if you think suffering is always more real than joy. That's a temperament, not an argument.
My guess. But I also think if you can't answer Benatar's asymmetry without saying, "But babies are cute," you should maybe sit with it.
Babies aren't cute. They look like angry prunes for 6 months. But my brother has 2 kids, and I watched him become less of a jerk. Not because he got moral, but because he had to care for someone who couldn't fire him.
That's the most romantic thing you've ever said.
I'm saying there's a difference between an abstract life and a lived relation. Plato called it begetting in beauty. You can't get that from a spreadsheet.
You can get it from a very emotionally demanding dog.
Not the same.
No, but the dog doesn't have to inherit the climate crisis.
You're going to bring up the climate, aren't you?
I mean, we just had Asheville turn into an island and Canadian smoke choking the East Coast. We're at 1.54 degrees. Bringing a kid into this feels like ordering dessert on the Titanic after the iceberg.
But humans had kids during the Black Death, during world wars, during famines. The alternative is to say only the ignorant or the delusional get to reproduce.
Maybe that's not wrong. If you know the house is burning, do you invite someone inside?
The house has always been burning. That's the human condition. Benatar's never have been is a solution that ends the question by ending the questioner.
And maybe the questioner should end. Not by suicide, by not making new questioners.
I don't know. I'm not going to have kids because the polis demands it, but I'm not going to say it's always a harm. That feels like a philosopher trying to win a debate with life.
Maybe life loses the debate.
Then why are you still here?
Because I was already dragged into the arena. I didn't sign the consent form.